Hello, dear hearts. May this message find you all blessed, happy, and most importantly, safe in amidst such a, intense is the right word, and expositionally difficult to process Scorpio season that doesn't necessarily always come with this level of intensity. I'm sure many of you remember when we had the eclipses in Scorpio on the Scorpio-Taurus axis, what the recent past was like when the nodes were also in that positioning, how the lunar nodes, how much their presence as an eclipse, the intensity of energy in those signs and the Taurus and Scorpio axis, how much that, worked the collective and all of us, particularly personally, because they're very personal signs. Scorpio and Taurus are exceptionally personal signs. So when I say personal, I mean they really do work with the self in ways that are intimate, not on a public stage or platform, and they really work, if you imagine yourself, your I, your ego identity as soil, they really work the land, and Taurus works the land itself to make it fertile so that good things can sprout. And, Scorpio works the land which is living in the depths of the psyche. And that terrain is generally more, away from a grounded state. It's in fact quite vast, and it can be very confusing. So the depths of the psyche and all the different parts of the psyche and the degrees of the psyche and the angles of the psyche and all the different rooms you can enter, if you dare. Technically, Scorpio works that terrain, that land, and it's like working space. It's like working, imagine the infinite sky, and what you can find there. So it's working with land, terrain that doesn't have that sense of sanity which comes from the Taurian grounded working the self, the ego identity, making it fertile. So it's personal. They're very personal. And just to give you a bit of a comparison, for example, if you look at the Virgo Pisces axis, which we're on now, when we look at the lunar nodes, directionally heading for Pisces and departing from Virgo in terms of the collective teaching, they're both, in terms of star signs, very, very selfless, and they're not as personal. Interestingly, it's also not something that revolves around the superficial world of when something isn't personal. And I'll get into that in a moment. Excuse me. But if we're looking at what it means by it not being personal, they have a selfless kind of infinity to them, both star signs, Virgo and Pisces, and are really here for some kind of more compassionate act or sacrifice. And it's difficult for that to be understood if we look at it straight on. But their place in us, in our star map, that axis, it's always going to be about how the masses are impacted, how the environment is impacted, how the work that is accomplished impacts the whole, our contribution to the whole. And it's happening in a way that doesn't make the self a priority. Virgo and Piscean energy, even if they want to make the self a priority, it's a very difficult thing, especially the ego identity, because they're so easily influenced by the absorption of what is happening everywhere, every moment, as well as the influences. And that can be a blessing, and that can also be a curse. And the Virgoan energy in that context is influenced by the critical detail of the structure and how to actually nourish everything and keep everything functional and within a system that has everything it needs, especially the information, the conduct, to have a functioning force. If you look at, workforces, for example, you'll notice that the Virgoan energy can be exceptionally productive, especially if left to, analyze, critique, and complement whatever is around, be a support to that. They need to be a support to something. As you can see, once again, it's about what they're contributing to, and it's not so much about the self. It's not personal. Piscean energy, on the contrary, function in really larger scales of means that are constantly giving, however, by force, because until that energy is harnessed and worked with in a way that is more conscious, then it can be incredibly nourishing. When it is not harnessed, it can be destructive, and generally in a way that is very much like taking, hallucinogenics and being so far away from reality, from what actually is really authentically taking place. So having an extremely disconnected narrative. And it's excellent for artists, it's excellent for creative people, because they can create incredible dimensions and offer that, in the arts field, and that's wonderful. But, in terms of it, again, not being personal, like I'm just mentioning what we're facing right now with the Taurus full moon being very personal, as is the Scorpio constellation, the Piscean energies, actually the lunar nodes that we're on right now, directionally, is pushing us to the exalted understanding of that influence, which is about compassion and empathy that isn't driven by the victim, isn't driven by the forced idea, but is taken into circumstance of benevolence through that divine evolution in the exalted version of the sign. And what that does for the whole is make us very empathetic, very sensitive to each other, and very aware of how there is an infinity here in amidst everything. And it can really be worked with if we're aware of the impact we have on others through whatever we're doing, and above all, what our intentions and our hearts, wishes and aspirations are in amidst everything that's taking place. So again, as you can see, the personal impact, coming from the Taurian and Scorpio axis, Scorpionic energy and Taurian energy, in opposition, as they are, also complement a similar opposition, because they're facing each other. So they come from a ground that's obviously stimulating something that is identical, that is of the same in terms of a force, in terms of an energy. And that's personal, intimacy. That would be one of the key words, would be intimacy, And it's very different to the superficial tendency of, not being personal, which you could put a wonderful example on how, Libra and Aries function as opposites in our sky. Librans are all about harmony. They need harmony to function. They need things to be balanced in their environment, with people, with circumstances, with whoever's there. And Aries needs to be seen as the go-getter, the boss, the one who can accomplish what is needed for the whole, for the team. How can Aries be a boss, be a leader, be a go-getter for the team if there isn't a team saying that's what they are? So see the dependency, again, based on service to the function of the whole, even if it's superficial. But the Scorpionic, once again, and the Taurian energy, where we're at right now with this full moon, gives us such a elaborate understanding of intimacy. They're of the most private and secretive star signs, and the way that they keep their privacy, both of these star signs, are very different. But again, it comes from a fundamental similarity, which is privacy, intimacy, secrecy. And the reason is because they're working a certain terrain. As Taurus, Taurian energy is working the ground of the self, so beneficial things can sprout. The Scorpionic energy goes to where nobody else can arrive. No one else in in the cosmos, and that's the depths of the psyche, the depths of the subconscious, the most difficult parts of one's being, when it's exalted, not when it's destructive, because the opposite to that exceptional ability to awaken and to function in the most clearest way has its polar opposite, which is the most destructive capacity, can still live in the same side of the coin, if we're not working it for its most exalted capacity. So Scorpionic energy has that, just as the side of the coin has the incredible ability to awaken through going to where nothing else can arrive in terms of the depths, and really getting down there and being able to be present in those most tender, most difficult, most, again, destructive degrees of a part of our being. If that's, not aimed for in the most exalted way, then there's a tendency for mere destruction, and in ways that are more, destructive than absolutely any other force in our skies as well. Taurine energy has the complete extreme opposite capacity for destruction. And I'll tell you about that right now, but I want to interrupt this by saying, if you're hearing all sorts of noise in the background, it's the pets. They're absolutely going crazy on this full moon. And it's normal for pets to have a unique reaction also to the way the lunar phases impact us. Animals are getting just as affected. And in fact, are really obviously showing their, their communication in these types of moments in our skies. So if you're hearing all sorts of noises, it's all the animals saying hi here with all their heart and love. So yes, the Taurian energy. The Taurian energy has, in an exalted way, a very similar vibration, again manifesting differently to what Scorpio has, and that's never giving up. Never giving up. A lot of you may know this, but for example, the great sage Gautama Siddhartha, who was fully awakened and liberated in Bodh Gaya in India, he was a Taurus. He was actually a Taurus, and he was fully awakened, and his determination to just sit in meditation, to literally teach us all meditation, provide the origins of meditation as a practice on this earth in this time frame we're in, 2,600 years ago. He basically had that stamina of a Taurian force that literally just sat there. Now imagine sitting in the same place for forever until you accomplish something true, without giving up. It's very Taurian. It's very much, on point that was his star sign. As an example, I'm just giving you this so you can see Taurian energy does that. It can never let go of a situational circumstance until it arrives to where it's going. It doesn't matter if it's going very slow or we don't have any clue if it is even moving or not. Generally, Taurian energy may perceive that it's not even moving, but it really is. It's just in a different rhythm. And, excuse me, and they don't give up, They don't give up. And Scorpio is the same. Scorpio energy is the same. Once it's in a circumstance or situation, seldom can it in any way give up. So if there's a goal, if there's an aim, it will not in any way give up until that is accomplished. So they both have the same frequency, vibration. They're of the same. Remember that ground. They're just expressing it in the two completely opposite ways, but coming from the same vibration, the same communication of energy, the same ground. So, in saying this, the destructive tendency of Taurus is that when it does give up, if it does give up, there's a stubbornness, it's not flexible. It might not ever be able to, come back if it does give up to a circumstance or situation. And it takes a lot for it to do that, to stop, to give up, or to end something, because once it decides to commit, it's very committed and can be painfully slow at ever-changing course if needed as well. But in saying this, if it does, the stubbornness there, because it took so much to change course, to change course, once it does do it, it can never go back. That energy can never go back. Scorpio similarly can go through so many ends and beginnings within a cycle of a circumstance, but keep committing to it, you see? It's still focusing on the commitment, but it just erupts and continues. It can go through the death process effortlessly. Taurian energy can't. It just cannot. It cannot fathom ends, it doesn't see them because it has a destination, it has a goal. So the end is the goal. So if they make a choice, that's it. If you see what I'm trying to explain. Scorpionic energy, however, can make a decision, but it can destroy that decision within the decision over and over to just bring it back together again, to test its stamina, to test its capacity. Scorpios need Scorpionic energy needs very declarative, when you declare something in very extreme ways to show your commitment, the testing that's involved in a Scorpio. When we're talking about intimacy, you've got to have an ability to stay in that commitment despite the amount of change that can happen without the Scorpionic presence or energy to depart. But it can go through many transformative changes. So imagine the axis of Taurus and Scorpio and Taurus on this full moon in Taurus is doing what? If we understand it now, we can see that there is this difference. There is a complete commitment that cannot easily change course versus a very destructive, more death-oriented force that needs the change and therefore demands the transformation through the change, but uses that for commitment evidence, for the evidence that can be found in just how capable are we to commit despite all of what needs to change. You understand? So Taurine energy wouldn't do it in that way. It would commit, make that choice, and that's the declaration. It won't need to make much change after that. It won't need to do anything, in fact. It would just commit and keep going until whatever it is that they're committed to, until that process is accomplished. So if these two opposing forces are opposing each other, as they always are, coming from the same force, which is commitment, imagine the struggle in the language. Scorpio would want Taurus to extremely declare its commitment through going through change, going through resurrection, going through ends and then beginnings again, but staying intact, staying on the same course. Taurus, however, would like no bumps on the road and a straight line all the way to the finish and at a very healthy pace that doesn't need change or, too much interference or distraction other than the determined stubbornness to go on until the course is complete. So they're both very appreciative of commitment, but in the completely different ways, in the opposing ways. Where do they meet? In the commitment. Do opposites attract? Of course they do. And when the full moon is in Taurus, remember, we're nourishing the terrain of the I, of the self, of the ego identity, so that fruitful things can sprout, beneficial, helpful results. However, we are also getting quite, you could say, stubborn about what we really want, what we believe in, what we need to feel secure and safe. And because they're intimate signs, of the most intimate signs, not superficially but authentically, this axis of, Scorpio and Taurus, it's very personal. This is where vendettas happen in the world when we look at the dark point. And there are vendettas taking place right now in the world. It's all over the news. There are family feuds. There are very personal issues going on in the world right now that are to do with where either or has felt betrayed or harmed in a personal way. There are people fighting on the street because of betrayal, because of, cheating, because of anything that involves personal error, where you have harmed someone personally, where you have crossed the line, and the word commitment and intimacy and privacy and secrecy, they flash up like headlines. So all the factors that we're going through, and thank you for your patience in listening to this and getting through this step by step, because when I give the way I do. And those of you who know me, you've got to just hold space to receive it in the way that it forms and then flows into you. And that way you can gradually open up and flourish in the information. So there's a lot, there's a bountiful. So just soak it in and process it at your own speed. But yes, as I was saying, there's such a yes, dear hearts. So all the factors that we're going through, absolutely all of them right now, are very much revolving around this, I guess, deep dive. The best way to put it is, we're not on a superficial frontier. We're in Scorpio season. It's the Taurus full moon. At the end of November, we'll have, close to the end of November, we'll have the new moon in Scorpio. We also have Venus moving into Scorpio, which is a wonderful, wonderful placement. Even though many complain about it, I find it extremely well placed, especially when in the early degrees of the sign, because there's an empowerment there when deeply involved, especially if well aspected. So I think Venus, in Scorpio, personally, I think it's a great placement. Right now she's at the last degrees of Libra, but, as the full moon still sits at, 97% full, Venus will be going into, slowly going into Scorpio. So that will be great. Coupled with, the Black Moon Lilith having her incredible, exalted finale of her time, her reign in Scorpio, her exalted, most beloved station in Scorpio until the end of the year, where she departs the sign and prepares to enter Sagittarius. So we have 2 months of her, November and December, which are going to be a grand finale of what she's capable of offering this whole world in her 9-month transit in the sign of Scorpio. And, personally for me, it's been exquisite. As hard as it's been, because, Scorpio energy is purificative when working with Lilith and Scorpio. As hard as it's been, it's never going to deceive or fail, because it's always wanting to get to the real most important parts of us and heal what's needed, especially where we would never generally be able to approach. So she has done wonders, and especially for those who have been abused, for those who have had their power stolen from them, who have had anything stolen from them, for those who have been, when we're victims of abuse, we lose parts of ourselves in certain circumstances and people and situations. So Lilith and Scorpio is incredible at retrieving all of that for us and bringing a voice to those who don't have a voice, who don't know how to defend their rights when it comes to limitations and, again, the places that we dare not go. So it's an incredible transit. It's been very, very hard, very painful, because there's been a lot of deaths wherever Scorpio is, even in Scorpio season. There's so much dying, death and dying. It's just part of what this dying part of the year, even though, the southern hemisphere is going towards their summer months, no matter what, the end of the year is a dying portion until we reach the astrological new year. So, the astrological new year is in March, every March at the equinox, and that's where we really commence. That's the starting point. That's the life portion, entering the life portion. But now we're in the dying portion of the year, especially from the end of October 2025 and in general, going all the way until the equinox. And it's the time of re-entering the sacredness of the inner world, regardless of which hemisphere we're in. And it's so strongly oriented to the sacred feminine. I mean, it's like being in the womb again. And it's very much about the portal of the death of a year and entering a new one. And this energy is not something we can dismiss, because we are, all of us on this earth, 8 billion plus of us, are going through an end when the year ends and commencing a new year, And there are so many factors. There are the numbers involved, numerologically, there's the energy involved of the shift, there's also the belief systems, and even if we are or not following the Lunar New Year, some cultures do, even that still considers this part of the year as being a portal of endings. So Scorpio season starts that. As soon as Scorpio season commences, that's it. We're in the dying portion of the year. And there's just so much death and dying in all themes in our lives, which then bring the rejuvenation, the phoenix rising from the ashes, the rebirth. And that rebirth can be literal. It can be in, in other ways that are symbolic. But yes, people are going through endings. Relationships are facing their challenging ends in these times too. It's similar to what we go through when eclipses are happening. Things just have to leave their due. But when it's the dying portion of the year, it's not as hard to navigate through. Because the dying portion of the year, it's just part of the energy. So things depart, return, transform, cleanse, the seeds, get well placed, and cultivated in the dark, in the silence, the intention, the magic of the intention. But most importantly, it's easier to understand and work through. If there are many eclipses at this time of year, then it's much harder, because the way the energy can work, the change is quite grandiose, and it doesn't seem to have a sense of our involvement. It's a bit more out of our involvement. So being very personally involved now, very deeply and personally involved with this time of year, with the Taurus Scorpio axis, understanding what that means is that, all the offenses, all the suffering that's taking place right now is very personal. People are looking at their lives through the lens of what means something to them, what they hold dear in their hearts. There's a lot of truth-seeking in ways that are going for the deep dive, Not so much the altruistic truth-seeking, but when we look at the deep dive of the inner world to find out what's really going on with us, what do we really want? Is this right? Am I in the right situation? Have I made the right choice? Also finding the strength to ask the right questions. And Lilith in Scorpio right now is exceptionally helpful. Mars has been in Scorpio very well placed with Mercury in Scorpio. So there was an incredible stellium in the Scorpionic theme, at the end of October and in the early days of November. And will continue to actually be, again, entering a very big stellium later on in this month in November in Scorpio, which, will have at least 5 planets in the sign. The Black Moon Lilith, she's going to be doing all sorts of things this month for us. And as I said, Venus is preparing to enter Scorpio, and that will be strongly felt from the 7th and 8th and onwards of November 2025. So, Mercury's in retrograde in Sagittarius and Scorpio. And, this is again telling me and you and everybody that imagine the level of difficulty a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio and Sagittarius can provide. The challenge is what I'm referring to. So it goes to where there's bad blood. It goes to where there's grudges. It goes to where there's areas that have pained us personally that we need to revisit. Right now, as Mercury retrogrades through Sagittarius, it will create more conflict around travel, transportation, action around travel. And that's sitting with Mars in Sagittarius at 0 degrees, which is still getting a bit of the last point of Scorpio. So, the wish to get things going and move about and travel and just go on the road and do what needs to be done, we can feel a sense of delay and petty obstacles. And generally Mercury in Sagittarius retrogrades are more literal. I remember I had an incredible experience when I was in Chile in the Atacama Desert many years ago, doing a wonderful offering of astrology there in an excellent retreat that was put together by Gurans for people that wanted to do this truth-seeking self-discovery. And it was an incredible group of women, and we were there, and I was conducting the astrological, part of the portion of the retreat. And it was, amazing because they planned it during a Mercury retrograde in Sagittarius, and it wasn't deliberate, but it was the best time, for a retreat like that. So that was for me, evidence of the power of Mercury in retrograde when applied correctly. So in Sagittarius now, but not for that much longer, for the next week or so, the retrograde is saying what? It's saying self-discovery, truth seek, do the inward dive, find the answers that you're looking for within you. Go in deeply, try and find what's happening, seek it out. And altruistically, because Sagittarian offers the benefits, the Jupiterian benefits, the blessing. Simultaneously, though, soon it will be heading through Scorpio again. Mercury in Scorpio retrograde. And that will be very challenged and very difficult for everybody, because we're going to revisit bad blood. We're going to revisit the grudge. We're going to revisit the pain. And also, there's a lot of things that have been taken from others that shouldn't have been taken from others. Circumstances do that in life. We lose what we're not supposed to lose. And Mercury in Scorpio cannot handle loss, especially if it's not done truthfully. So there will be investigative pursuits to get to the bottom of why things happen the way they did. Mercury in Scorpio is an investigator, is a detective. It will get to the bottom of who did it, who did it, like we say on the TV crimes shows. Who did it? So that's the main question. So if there's like a big suffering, if there's been a lot of doubt around where the cause of suffering has come from, that period will help. Who was the cause? What did it? What was it? And Mercury in Scorpio retrograde can bring clarity, can offer the right answers. Where in the past we have perhaps not been clear about where certain things came from or arose from, this type of retrograde really takes us to those very dark points. And with Lilith in Scorpio there, as well as Venus being there, the new moon being there, the sun being there, all in Scorpio, it's impossible to fail. We will find the cause of where we've been robbed, where power's been taken for us, where we have lost things to the unworthy situations or people or circumstances, where the causes really come from, who has been the villain, in the story. And then also how to find peace in knowing that, right? And finally being able to be free from, I guess, so much when you come to the bottom of things. So it's a detective-like energy and presence, and it's not easy. It's not an easy one. This month is explosive. It's intense. It's wild. It's extreme. This lunation, as wonderful as Taurus is, with Uranus in Gemini at 0 degrees, soon to re-enter Taurus, as wonderful as this, Taurian energy can be, because it offers ground and stability, it's not looking up because the Scorpio forces are too strong. So, the full moon is just giving us, I guess, a bit of nourishment, a bit of cultivation of the right earth to aim for the right fruit in our efforts. But it is also giving us a very quick and temporary nourishment, I'll be very honest, before all sorts of eruptions of impossible times, And when I say that, I mean, you'll be amazed at what can take place when there's no certainty, when there's no guarantee, and Scorpio wants the certainty, wants the guarantees. So, in order to get that, you can imagine what can happen in order for that to take place. It's like saying, if you find a friend, where's the guarantee they'll be your friend, right? If you find an enemy, where's the guarantee they'll be your enemy? It's also messy. Nothing is always in one position and fixed. And, we're many things for many people, and many people are many things for us. And because of that, the order, you could say, the law and order of the Taurian and Scorpio energy in opposition, isn't easy for most because they hold a certain permanence. But imagine, if you're the Lord of Death and Venus, in terms of their planetary rulers, it's hard to not call them permanent. So, in terms of forces in this reality. So, they're strong. That's the point. And they have huge functions. Plutonian energy and Venusian energy, huge functions. And that's Taurus and Scorpio. And when they come together, as they do, it's not for nothing. It's part of a certain dance in the universe that is bringing things to a fixed and permanent place, only to change what can't be changed, only to ensure development, but in their court. So Taurus does it in a way that is unnoticeable. And Scorpio does it in the extreme opposite way. It makes it very noticeable. But they both do it. They both offer incredible change and divine evolution. But it's so hard for any other composition to understand because their terms, let's say, their rules, their regulations are just impossible sometimes. So that's why this month is impossible, and we have to work with it in the highest possible way, and that's to aim for divine transformation, to be willing to heal, to also be willing to let go, and to also count your blessings if endings do happen, because they are coming in a divine portal of ending. So they're supporting your divine evolution if endings happen. And on a basic level, all of this does also rule money, the practical world, inheritances, lump sums, money in general, livelihood, practical security. So all of that is being assessed as well, and what's owed, like the debt collector has to come. And also what needs to be given, so what one would receive. That's also part of the power of this access. Venusian, Taurian energy. Imagine the bountiful of what can be harvested, and imagine what Plutonian Scorpio energy can take, what needs to be taken, right? So in the protection of both signs, they offer a lot of protection. We do have to understand we're getting a nourished, genuine nourished, cocoon for the 5th and 6th of November 2025. And then we're right in it again, in the truth of the spell of what this season is all about. And it's massive, this end of year. Has a similarity to what an eclipse season can do, but I would say it's more manageable and more obvious. So the honesty, I think, will be the most impressive, because everybody's looking for honesty deep down, even if they pretend they're not. It's a freeing thing, the truth in circumstance. And I don't want to keep going on about this too much, but it really does mean a lot to me as well when such stelliums take place in our skies, and also, the concentrated energy in one place, because then it's a point of harnessing what's available to cultivate it at the maximum. So anyone who has a lot of Taurus and Scorpio in their star map will really be feeling this month. But in terms of the overall energy, it's going to be felt by everybody. Do have a look where Scorpio and Taurus is in your own star map. If you're on my newsletter, my free e-newsletter, TarotbyTashi.com, you can actually request to get the grand finale for Lilith and Scorpio audio talks, which is very much about this end of year. And there's a lot of mystery school wisdom there that will really help us work with the darkness, understanding it, and I guess in the best words, coming out of the dark points of the psyche and rising to the highest degree using this end of year's astrological support. So you can request that. It's available in private links, and I'll be able to tell you how to get that going. And most importantly, yes, I mustn't forget, Jupiter is in Cancer and is making wonderful complementary supportive acts, great complementary, yes, support to the Scorpio theme, and also with Pisces there. So it's having a lot of water in our skies. So the axis, the trines, the sextiles, the beautiful, beautiful trines above all, are, watery. The water element is exalted right now. It's at the maximum. But Jupiter being in Cancer offers an abundance of it. So there will be flooding, unfortunately, rainfall that could be healthy for some, difficult for others. Also flooding of emotions with that abundance in Jupiter and Cancer, the way it will be hit by the Scorpionic energy and the Piscean energy. And, we've just got to be very aware of the water element, how it communicates, because it's going to be also this month and at the early days of December, again, abundantly making itself known to us, where it's lacking and where it's overflowing, and especially on an emotional level, and how we relate to purification, how we cleanse, how we deal with the emotional plane, and relate to the element water in that process. But again, floodings tend to happen a lot when this is strongly activated by Jupiter, as well as worldwide circumstances with the element water. Again, where there's a lack or an abundance. So how the coasts get affected, how, water rises, how rain falls, how storms happen suddenly, and then, we're not quite sure, where it all just erupted from. So there is that happening too. So we just need to be very aware of the water element and respect it and honor it, and ask for it to be in harmony in amidst all the elements. Because it will be very much the spotlight this month and the early days of December 2025. Generally, water has been on the platform. I've been speaking about the water element for a very long time now. Worldwide, it's been a big theme, and it will continue to be. But there are moments where it's exceptionally urgent, and that's now. So keep that in your heart and mind too, please, in the way you respect the water element. So, yes, I could keep on telling you so much. I do want you all to absorb this. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Feel free to, connect through Instagram or email, or, however you wish to reach out. But it's good to let the nourishing happen of this Taurus full moon, and be ready for what I've mentioned, the truthfulness of what Scorpio can bring but also the way the pain erupts. It's very, very personal. And that's where respect is needed, because the balancing of such opposites coming from the same story, the Venusian Taurus and the Plutonian Scorpio in this season are very permanent oriented, they're very committed. They're very ongoing. They're very much all the way. They're very total. So it's good to, understand. So then you taking it personal won't be as offensive or hard. Let the cosmos teach through such difficult constellations, but always for our divine evolution and highest degree of potential. And also in the way things are erupting, the arguments, the difficulties, the betrayals, the sorrow, the way things are erupting also, let's do our best to be a steward of peace and healing for others in amidst all that too, because it is hard. Not everyone can face the very depths. Not everyone is not everybody is ready to. So it's important to help others through those difficult moments as well. And hey, if there are any issues ever, if we have any doubt, sometimes it's good to just first see if we can resolve it through peaceful means. If there are ways to resolve things peacefully, it's always good to try like that first. And then, of course, if things have to end, then they end. So thank you so much, dear ones. Looking forward to have you all connect with Lilith and Scorpio and her teachings, this grand finale, this end of year, and wishing you all an incredibly nourishing full moon in Taurus. And enjoy also the Pleiadian energy. Once again, the Pleiade is so closely linked to Uranus right now. In Gemini, this is really once in a lifetime incredible opportunity. Getting to experience the Pleiades right now, right there with Uranus. When Uranus is at the last degrees of Taurus and in the early degrees of Gemini, we're enjoying the great blessings from the fixed star, the Pleiades. And this moon is also giving us, before it enters Gemini, that lovely union with Uranus and the Pleiades. So rejoice, because then we get, also divine intervention. Those who call the shots, those who, I guess, determine the fates, the great diviners of the cosmos, the seers, the consorts of the Rishi stars, of the seven sages, the seven sisters, meant to be so much in so many different belief systems, but always coming back to one truth. They are the great mothers, the grandmothers, the great sages in the sacred feminine form who have seen it all, have lived it all, and have evolved so perfectly to be really keeping the keys to the universe and helping us all. But they intervene in mysterious ways. And when Uranus is with them, in sudden raw and electric ways that are only for our enlightenment. So there's a lot of benefit with this full moon. And also as we step towards, Venus going into Scorpio, just in these days right now, the 5th, 6th, 7th of November, you'll really feel quite a strong, tangible support from the universe, helpful support, getting you on your way, getting you where you need to go, especially if you're for the greater cause and you're not here selfishly, especially if you have vowed and you have wished and you have desired with all your heart and you have prayed and you have begged to be here for the greater cause, for the highest benefit, for the utmost benefit, for the best service to everyone and everything. That's when you'll really see the blessings that come, because we're not ever alone. If we're really here to do our best to help and heal this whole earth and each other, we will always be helped. always. So always trust that. Okay, so enjoy that. All my love. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.